Welcome back to Weather Command. Tropical Storm Harold is the first Atlantic system of the season to make landfall in the U.S. coastline. Fox Weather with team coverage as Harold moves through Texas. Meteorologist Jason Frazier in Padre Island. Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker Mark Sudduth in Corpus Christi Bay. And also, we have our camera network bringing us ground truth of these storms. Kiana Lewis and Stephen Morgan on the desk. We're tracking Harold with continuing coverage as we go throughout the day. That vantage point right there, a live view of Padre Island, shows you the barrier island, the beach that takes the brunt as a coastal storm rages from sea to shore. Surf's up, that's for sure. We're getting less than a 3-foot storm surge. Winds are blowing above 45 miles an hour. We've had some gauges pushing that mark. We'll be continuing with you. You can download the app, take us anywhere, stream it all day long. FoxWeather.com is the place to find out more. Welcome back, everyone, here to Weather Command on a Tuesday. I'm Amy Freeze. Beneficial rain for Texas. Yes, the moisture is helping in two ways. The clouds and the rain will tame temperatures that have been so hot all summer, so a slight cool down. But the rain also offers moisture to areas that have been in significant deficit. So at the very least, this offers drought relief. What does it look like as it comes on shore? First, we're going to go to Fox Weather's Jason Frazier. We see the stream of moisture coming up. We're waiting for landfall. Jason, at times, the outer rain bands have brought rain coming down sideways and fierce winds for you in that particular location. You've at least got a little shelter around you.
Yeah, thank goodness. And it is because of the winds. We had to move inside, and you can really hear the difference between inside versus outside. So this is me inside, and just to hear the wind, whoo! I mean, we have really been hearing the winds really pick up here since we have been out here for the last 4 hours here. Now, as we take a look at the radar, you can start to see a very defined eye with Tropical Storm Harold here. And we are expecting landfall here within about the next 30 minutes to an hour. But those winds have been rocking and rolling here. And that's usual with tropical systems here. As that defined eye gets closer and closer to land, we start to see those winds picking up here. But take a look at that buoy, 42020. Those winds have been gusting up to right around 43 miles per hour. I would estimate right here on Padre Island, it's pretty much the same thing. We've also been seeing an increase in wave activity here. Earlier this morning on Fox Weather First, when I was trying to report on this, I mean, the winds were making the rain literally blow sideways. So it was so hard to talk. And again, that's why we had to move in here. Look at all of that yellow that's popping up here on the radar. All of the rain has been right now moving over a lot of the barrier islands. So I'm on Padre Island, but over in South Padre Island, we're also starting to see an increase in not only the winds, but also some wave activity as well. All of this moving westward here. And Amy, the other interesting point to make here about Tropical Storm Harold, it is slowly starting to intensify here. It does have max winds at 50 miles per hour, but that forward motion is also picked up as well, about 21 miles per hour.
Yeah, and the speed of the storm is important, Jason, because when you talk about the speed, that means that the rain is going to race over the land, probably not with as much flood potential. And that's the case when we see the landfall here with Harold. But once the storm gets inland, that moisture can start to slow a little bit. The reason that West Texas perhaps may be exceptionally vulnerable. We're going to be checking back in with you now that landfall is imminent. So we'll be back with you, Jason Frazier, live in Padre Island. Let's get to Mark Sudduth, Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker. Mark is in Corpus Christi Bay. Mark, you've got your cameras positioned to see what happens with Harold. First storm of the season for the Atlantic coming onto the U.S. mainland.
Yep, this is the one here on the Gulf. We had Hillary just the other day on the West Coast. Hard to believe now, at least the audio is working better inside the truck here. But we do have a camera sitting out there down basically at ground level, watching these waves come in off of Corpus Christi Bay. It's been picking up here, as Jason talked about, that center tightening up, the rain bands coming in. Not too serious yet, but certainly an increase here in the last half hour or so.
And this is going to be your time frame. We've got the storm within, 30 miles of the coastline. The geography, though, very low there for Texas. If you talk about the coastal flood threat, usually you can't rule it out, but at the same time, there's not a massive flood threat when you see a surge that's below 3 feet for the areas in and around Corpus Christi.
Right, not life-threatening, but if you're not careful, then it can be a big problem. I think we're going to look back at Harold and say, wow, this is another one of those that we're glad that it didn't have another 2 days out over the water. because looking at that radar there in real time, we're seeing this thing tighten up. A very typical thing that we see as they approach the coast perpendicularly. That friction helps to tighten up that center, that core a little bit, maybe making those winds more efficient to get down to the surface. A rough several hours to go down here along the Texas coast.
Your highest gust in Corpus Christi Bay is up to 51 miles an hour. You've been able to get some visuals, though. I mean, what a 48-hour period going from, Hillary to Harold, both these storms, but they're different in so many ways. The vulnerability here for inland flooding will be the next issue that Harold brings after it makes landfall. I mean, West Texas could get exceptionally wet with the moisture that's coming in off the Atlantic.
Yes, and what you talked about earlier, that this moisture could come around the southwest side of that massive heat dome, maybe making it into the desert southwest with more rain for Arizona, southwest Utah. That's a favorite area of mine during monsoon season. This is really going to be a big impact. We talk about the benefits of rain, but as you said earlier, a lot of people still on vacation out there, those big national parks. This will have impacts, Harold, several days after it's done here on the Texas coast. I
mean, can you imagine the headline, other than living it, where you have both a Pacific and Atlantic tropical system impacting the southwest U.S.? It's almost mind-boggling, even if it is the leftovers. Can't leave you without mentioning Harvey. We're up against the anniversary here of Harvey, which, of course, is a very different H storm. But Harold took the place on the alphabetical list of Harvey. Coincidentally, we are in the anniversary time frame.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was in this area for Harvey. Of course, I ended up in Houston when the terrible flood disaster commenced up there, and that was a tropical storm at the time, dumping unheard of amounts of rain, very devastating. Coming up now on the 6-year anniversary, of course, those names get retired when they are notable, and Harvey certainly was notable.
All right, tracking the storm. I can see the waves jumping up behind you. We'll continue to check in as we make landfall. Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker marks out at live in Corpus Christi Bay, where the winds are gusting at 51 miles an hour. Thank you to you, Mark. Let's get more on the track. We talked about the storm coming inland. Kiana, a lot more of this storm to go. It makes landfall, but then it's got to make its way over South Texas.
That's exactly right. It may even be traveling farther than that as we head later into the week. We'll talk about that in a second, but we do want to bring up the future track for you and get you going on what's expected through at least today, the next 24 hours or so. Winds are going to continue to peak with this storm, but so is the rain. We're looking at heavy rain moving in across, say, Corpus Christi down towards Brownsville, but it really picks up in southwestern portions of the state. So we're looking at areas off towards the west that are going to really continue to see the heaviest of the rain. And that's where we actually see our biggest flood threat as well. Looking at our Fox model, taking us through the timing here, even into later this afternoon. Rain continues across southern portions of the state and then exits off towards, say, Mexico for a quick second before heading towards the desert southwest. So by the end of today, Texas should start to see some much drier conditions, maybe a few scattered showers and storms through the afternoon and early evening as the bulk of the moisture continues to track off towards the west.
Yeah, plenty of the storm to go. Let's get back to the radar. We could have landfall within the next 10 minutes here. When you look at the radar, we're starting to see some evidence here of the strengthening or the rapid intensification right off the shoreline. And Stephen, the radar does speak volumes when you start to look at the intensity of a storm or it getting stronger. And we're starting to see curvature here, the outer band starting to really form. This is the meat of the storm right now.
I echo what Mark and probably a host of meteorologists are saying. If this thing was over the Gulf of Mexico for just 12 more hours, we would maybe be talking about a hurricane. It is an all too common theme as we see these things tighten up as they get close to the Texas coastline. And notably here, watching and looking at all the details, we've got the barrier island, which is where our Jason Fraser is, of Padre Island. You head a little farther to the south and you'd get into South Padre Island. Between the barrier islands, you have Laguna Madre. That's more open waters. And oftentimes what we'll see is that initial landfall along one of these barrier islands, which would be Padre Island. Then you head farther inland and there's this county called Kennedy County. Would you know it's the third least populous county in the state of Texas? There's 350 people that live there. It's very low lying, not a huge city, really even close. You have to go to the county south of it, which is Willacy, which is where Port Mansfield is located. The farther north you go, the more populous it gets because that's where Corpus Christi Bay and other cities are located. But as we're watching this thing, actually the western eye wall, or the western portion of the eye wall, is now moving over Padre Island, again referencing where Jason has been located. So perhaps some of the strongest winds that we have seen. That special update that we got from the Hurricane Center just at the top of this hour was that this thing was intensifying with 50-mile-per-hour winds.
Yeah, and we've got a clock at least coming out of the bay there at 50-51. So that's another reason why we're starting to see some of those waves really kick up behind Mark Sudduth. We could see the ocean becoming activated there, but the rain and wind bands that we're seeing coming in towards the barrier island there for Jason, that I think is really going to be the good look at the moisture the storm brings in from the Atlantic.
And what we'll be watching too here over the next probably 30 minutes is where that heaviest rain might be setting up. It could be right over Corpus Christi, Texas. I mean, the northern side of the storm is where we've really seen the bulk of the moisture and where we've seen at least the most widespread coverage. And to even be able to see, when we're talking about a tropical storm that just developed in the wee hours of this morning, I think the 2 a.m. update is when the National Hurricane Center classified this as a tropical storm. To watch this thing even strengthen just a little bit as it was quickly running out of real estate is impressive. The rain rates are up there, but I think most notable is that we're seeing that core on radar.
Kiana, one of the things we can see when a storm comes inland like this is severe weather. Severe weather can pop up. We've had 2 tornado warnings. You can have a water spout. You can have a quick twisting thunderstorm once we come on land. I mean, that'll be a threat that we have to look at. Thankfully, we've got a less populated area where we get the brunt of the storm, but you can't rule it out just south of Corpus Christi. That's right, and that's where we're going to have to continue to watch through the latter half of this afternoon, too. Once this makes way on land, we are looking at more of a flooding threat, but it's leading up to that. The leading edge of Harold could produce some of those twisting mechanisms, those tornadic thunderstorms that we need to watch for. We've already seen 2 warnings so far today. So far, it doesn't look like we have any pockets of rotation embedded in this so far. So that's some good news. Some of our higher winds, as you guys mentioned, are to the south over the San Padre Islands. That's where we'll continue to watch for any type of twisting. But for now, looks like we're okay in terms of maybe those severe weather threats. But most of the South Texas area does have that possibility of severe weather. Yeah, the overriding headline, too, is the storm is not deadly or potent if you're paying attention and staying out of the way in the path of the storm. But what it could do is bring very beneficial rain to areas that need it. We're seeing the brunt of us. We'll see some big winds and some rain come on shore. But much of South Texas desperately needs this. If it was a bigger storm and we were seeing portions of central or even northern Texas get more rain, this would be good news. But they just don't even get a glancing blow at this. Instead, the leftovers of Harold will sweep across the state, make their way into the desert southwest, and we'll be talking about the leftovers of Harold back where we saw Hillary have impacts in portions of the desert southwest, not necessarily California, but portions of Arizona, even north into Utah, Nevada, and maybe further north than that. So we'll wait and see. But the available moisture out of the Gulf that carries with this storm is something that could last for several days, getting caught up in the weather pattern. Let's get back out into the storm. We are waiting for landfall right now. Fox Weather's Jason Frazier is in Padre Island. Jason, we're expecting maybe within 10 minutes to see a landfall. You're in a place where winds will be the most fierce out of this storm.
Oh, Amy, I mean, they have picked up here within the past 30 minutes or so. We've been out here since the 6 a.m. hour, 5 o'clock local time here, and the winds have been going back and forth between anywhere between 30 to about 45 miles per hour. I am inside here, but I want to just take a step outside just to show you how strong some of these winds are. And you can really also start to see even the rain has really been picking up here within about the past 10 minutes or so here. So for anybody that is on any of these barrier islands here, you know, you definitely want to make sure to stay off of the roads. You want to stay inside here, because once this eye finally does come onto shore here, we will likely continue to see those winds picking up here. We'll likely see quite a bit of rain here. The good news is the forward motion of this storm here, Amy, it has been picking up here, 21 miles per hour here. So that means that we'll likely end up seeing some clearing by the latter half of this afternoon. But the winds, I think, are really the bigger story here, Amy. You know, the fact that this has been picking up in speed, that means we'll likely see some lesser totals in terms of some of that rain.
Yeah, it'll be quick moving right along the shoreline, that's for sure. The wind speeds in the buoys just offshore are back down to 40 miles an hour. We've had some gusts just north of you, just south of Corpus Christi, up to 25 to 30 mile an hour wind gusts. And we're watching these different buoy cams that are giving us a vantage point. Of course, when the storm gets closer, there's less visibility because the rain comes down. The area you're in, the barrier island, that's really a protection of sorts for coastal storms like this. I mean, this is where we take the brunt of the storm, right?
Yeah, so I often compare barrier islands to sponges, right? What essentially ends up happening is the storms tend to be the strongest as they're approaching the coastline. And what these outer islands end up doing is they end up taking all of the moisture there. They end up it's like kind of like taking a sponge and just turning it inside and out there and draining that. So this is a good thing that we're seeing all of this heavier rain on some of the barrier islands. That means for places like Del Rio, as well as even those of you in the San Antonio area, this means less rain for you. If you are closer to the coastline, you know, think about it in terms of being connected to a gas station, right? You leave the gas station, you can go further if you have more gasoline inside your tank. But as you get further and further away from that gas station, that means that you can unfortunately continue to travel less and less here. So, you know, these winds, I think, really are going to be a major concern. I'm also really concerned about the potential for power outages because we've been seeing these winds really pick up here and rocking and rolling here, Amy.
Yeah, it is going to be probably with the next 5 to 10. We'll get the latest information coming in. But looking at the buoys with the wind speeds of 40 to 50 miles an hour inland, this will settle down rapidly. The friction that we get with the landfall is what starts to bring that down. The barrier islands tame the surge. And then once we get the storm sort of starting to pull apart, it doesn't have the circulation and organization. Here's a look at some of the power tracking that we've got going across Texas. Just to the west of Corpus Christi, there's been an area that we've seen maybe 5 to 15% outages in. But the other incredible part, we'll come back here to Studio W and do a little analysis on what type of population we're looking at. I think this is interesting to consider. This could perhaps be the best news of what's going on is you don't even have a lot of people that are just inland. South of Corpus Christi is not a highly populated area, so that's the power outage I was talking about. But you get down here, let's describe a little bit about the geography and the population, Stephen and Kiana, about who might be impacted by this.
Yeah, and there's a couple of counties that I'm watching. I mean, we have in Corpus Christi, San Patricio, as well as Nueces County, and then farther inland, you would eventually get into the city of Alice, Texas. I think as far as these power outages are concerned, it's right now on the lower end. Some good news there. This is relatively rural. I think what we watch for is where this thing will come on shore, as we're watching that happen right now. Major population centers, the closest would be Corpus Christi. Mark Sudduth has been there this morning. We've seen a little bit of that even storm tide moving through. As we look at the time, it's good that we're heading toward a lower tide cycle. Not that this is producing a big amount of storm surge, though. The threat is 1 to 3 foot. In fact, we didn't even have a storm surge warning get issued from the Hurricane Center. But nonetheless, it's good that this is happening as we're heading toward that lower cycle. We'll start to head up as we head into the evening hours and go more toward that high tide. But when we consider the geography and the approach that these tropical cyclones make to the Texas coastline, you see how this is concave. Think of the Outer Banks. Those are convex, and I have that switch. This is convex. The concave are the ones that look like, let's say, the Outer Banks. And that oftentimes is a better scenario for storm surge. What Texas and the design of Texas and this lower coastline is concerned, this is not ideal for surge. So that's why it becomes such a concern when we deal with these systems. I think we're fortunate, though, that it's not any worse with this system.
Yeah, when you talk about concave and the Outer Bank, you know, you get a center curve towards the channel, undercuts the slope. That's why you get a little bit more of a more dramatic wave or more dramatic surge of that water coming in. So makes sense that the geography there does not, you know, lend itself to dangerous situations. Let's go back to the radar, and we can see the outer bands have already well passed and come inland. And now we're looking at really what the center of the storm might bring as it gets a little bit closer and comes in this direction. The National Hurricane Center gave us the update of this potentially producing slightly stronger winds and a movement slightly more to the north. Flash flood warning pops up. It does include Corpus Christi proper, but clearly the rainfall is right here from the Barrier Islands inland as we start to see the storm make its way. Clayburgh, Texas is included in this, and the flash flood warning goes until 12:45. This is because of the amount of rain coming into a very dry and arid situation. When you look at the moisture of this comparatively, Gianna, one of the things when we look at a tropical system is the speed. And if the storm goes faster, it actually gives us less of a chance to get flooding comparatively to a very slow-moving storm.
Right, and I think that is why it seems as though over the next couple of days, West Texas actually gets the bulk of the heavier rain as opposed to the immediate coastline. Right now, you are looking at a flash flood warning over parts of Texas just to the south of Corpus Christi. Doesn't mean we won't see measurable and heavy rain, but we will see the bulk of our heaviest rain fall a little farther towards the west. Once this moves on shore, it kind of starts to decrease in terms of being a major impact, immediate impact, I should say. But we still see the heaviest of that rain as it continues to move on to the west. And I think that's why parts of West Texas actually continue to see or have that heightened threat for flash flooding.
Yeah, we have, in West Texas, the Marfa Plateau, we have a couple of mountain ranges. That's going to add an element. Mexico, just south of the border, is expected to probably pick up on the highest amounts of rain because we do get a little mountainous once we head south of the Rio Grande into the country of Mexico. But as far as that landfall is occurring right now, and as we're speaking, the heaviest rain that we've seen with this system right now moving through, it is mostly south of Corpus Christi, but given the nature of a landscape like Corpus Christi and the Bay, there will be those periodic flooding threats. The storm itself, as it was moving toward the western Gulf, it did pick up additional moisture, and we've seen a decent fetch of moisture on that northern periphery of this circulation. It's been on the northern side where we have seen the richest moisture so far, but to have the ability of this thing to actually form a pretty well-defined eye wall and to see that thing move on shore is impressive. We remember that just 24 hours ago, we weren't even talking about a named storm. We were considering and speculating that this would be given the name Harold, and it wasn't until shortly after midnight this morning where we got that name. So we're less than 12 hours since this has been named, and we already have a well-defined circulation with Tropical Storm Harold, and we have some gusty winds. These are winds, the purples that you're seeing pushing away from radar, and the indications of those purples, Seth, if we could query some of these, I believe that they're probably of the 60, 70 mile per hour threshold, but keep in mind, this is elevated. So this is that radar beam that's shooting up out of Corpus Christi. It's a little higher in elevation.
And Stephen, as we look at this, looking at what the rainfall has done, knowing that landfall is imminent, it looks as though we can say that tropical storm, put me back to the radar real quick so I can look here, because I think we have a landfall. It does appear right now, Fox Weather, Hurricane HQ going ahead and calling this Tropical Storm Harold making a landfall on Padre Island. That flash flooding is underway, but this storm right now bringing its heaviest portion of the rain inland. Is Jason ready? Could we go out to Jason and just get an update from him on the conditions? Let's get him ready so that we can see what's happening there, ground truth. The radar showing us the heavy rain. We've had a couple buoys reporting as well that we've had up to 50, 51 mile an hour max wind speeds, and there we have it, a landfall for Tropical Storm Harold. This is the first storm of the Atlantic season to make landfall on the coast of Texas. Pressure at 998 millimars, but tropical storm strength as it makes landfall there just outside of Corpus Christi on the Padre Island. This is a situation here where you had rapid intensification right before landfall. The reason that happened, we got a strong increase in the power there, a little position to the north, and also an uptick in the winds by about 5 miles an hour because of the warmth of water, likely. But the storm itself moving 20, 21 miles an hour, zips in, and now we've got landfall friction starts to pull the storm apart. I think that some of those things are actually good news for Harold. Had we had a much slower moving system out in the tropics, which, by the way, we tracked this at Fox Weather for an excess of 10 days watching this and what it could potentially be. All right, let's go out. Jason Frazier is ready right now. He is on Padre Island. And Jason, right now, less than 12 hours from looking at this Tropical Storm Harold named and now making a landfall for South
so
Texas.
Mike, one of the most important things I think I saw when I first walked out this morning was the huge temperature difference. You know, not only did we end up seeing the temperature go from about 85 degrees to right around 79 degrees as these outer rain bands had pushed through here, but we also saw the winds picking up here as well. I want to show you the difference of some of the winds here because, you know, whenever we talk about landfalling either tropical storms or either tropical depressions there, when you have that eye that's just outside there, you got that eye wall there, and that is usually when you see some of the strongest winds. So I'm inside here just to show you the difference of just a couple of feet. Woo! I mean, look at how much wind as well as rain there. You know, it is a huge difference there. So, you know, that's part of the reason why, Mike, you know, we are right now inside here, because as you move outside, the audio, unfortunately, is going to go downhill. Now, as a result of this, we've had a number of school systems. They have closed for the day. I mean, obviously, that is a good thing. You don't want your kids out there. And, of course, we've been seeing 2-hour delays for city officials up in the Corpus Christi area.
We dip in on the coverage right here as Fox Weather's Jason Frazier shares the landfall. Right now, we know Tropical Storm Harold makes landfall on Padre Island.
You too,
so
Mike.
we're able to confirm that. We're just watching Jason as he is a part of another report that he's giving across the platforms here at Fox Weather. So dipping into that, able to see the conditions. And once he gets out of the shelter, you saw how strong the winds are, and the buoy's reading around 45 to 50 at the top wind gusts right now. Back to the radar, and you can see there is a flash flood warning as the storm is making landfall. One of the things that is missing here, I think, of the equation when you typically see a landfall of a hurricane is a lot of lightning or a lot of storm reports that are coming in. This won't be the case, Stephen, that we see here because, one, we have a barrier island that takes a little bit of the brunt of the storm. You also have an inland area where there's less of a population. You have to go all the way to Corpus Christi, which is well north of how we're making landfall. And so there's the difference there and maybe some of the missing parts of the equation. But flooding could be an issue just south of Corpus Christi. They're included in the warning.
I think the biggest thing, too, when we're talking about these daily storms that we sometimes get right along the coastline in the Gulf of Mexico, we've got some pretty strong winds. We saw with Jason's live shot that as he steps out there, I mean, those winds are not affected by land at the moment because he's right there on the barrier island. And I guess it's more of a semantics or technicalities. We'll have a secondary landfall here momentarily. I bet it would be in that rural county of Kennedy County because it will, the center of Harold will briefly go back over water. That's what happens along these coastlines. We saw it even with Hurricane Ian on the western coast of Florida. But winds have been certainly on the gusty side. And when we have that onshore flow, I mean, we need to watch Corpus Christi Bay because as far as where these streamlines are concerned, we've got that wind pushing right into the bay. So anything that's lined right along the bay, we're probably seeing quite a bit of splash over too right here. And Corpus Christi would be the area where power loss could be a concern, something to watch at the moment with those winds. The most recent gusts out of the northeast at about 38 miles an hour. We've seen those gusts upwards of 40 miles an hour.
It looks like a NOAA buoy at Padre Island reported a sustained wind of 40 miles an hour and a gust of 59 miles an hour. That's a buoy. So there's a top wind speed that we've had. And also Laguna Shores had a sustained wind of 39. They had a gust up to 48. Okay. So looking at some of those numbers coming in. So the latest from the National Hurricane Center, again, Harold making landfall, Padre Island. This is about 50 miles south of Corpus Christi on the barrier island. Right now, the storm's moving at 21 miles an hour, so it's quickly going to go over the barrier island into some open waters, and then that secondary landfall that you mentioned, Stephen, could be coming up. But for the next couple of hours, tropical storm force winds can be expected to extend out of the center of the storm. So you could still be seeing inland wind speeds anywhere from 20 to 40 miles an hour until the storm really starts to weaken dramatically. And that probably happens just on the backside of that unpopulated, marshy area that is just inside of Padre Island once you see the secondary landfall. Not a highly populated area, but anyone who's in this area was given the tropical storm warning just to be on alert.
And this, once it moves through South Texas, I mean, we're going to be soon here in the phase of this thing trending downward. I mean, it was, when we look at the numbers, a lower end tropical storm, but we saw those winds reach at least 50 miles an hour. It's going to hug the Rio Grande Valley. Perhaps we'll see some of that moisture emerge into West Texas. That could lead to some flooding concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, we kept saying this morning, I find it a bit interesting. Texas needs the rain, and this is a good way to get rain. In fact, in the summer, it can be argued that maybe it's one of the only ways that we can see rain, especially when we get that ridge to dominate the weather. But South Texas here is going to get it, but no flood watches in effect. Those flood watches are in West Texas.
That's exactly right. I mean, West Texas really gets in on the bulk of some of that heavier rain heading through tonight and into tomorrow. And then eventually a lot of this moisture even filters into the desert Southwest as we head into the middle of and end of this week. So really right now we are seeing heavy rain, especially along the coastline as Harold continues to make landfall. But as we go through, again, later today, we'll continue to see that rain filtering through South Texas. That's where we get in on the bigger threats for flash flooding. We need to watch areas off towards the west, Laredo being one of those areas into tonight, and then eventually into tomorrow as well.
And by that time, you've got a depression on your hands. It loses the status of a storm. Right now, Tropical Storm Harold. You're watching Fox Weather Hurricane HQ. We are at the top of the hour. We are not going to break. We're going to continue with our coverage. Tropical Storm Harold, 50-mile-an-hour winds, moving west-northwest at 21 miles an hour, has made landfall at South Padre Island. So the first tropical storm of the Atlantic season to make a U.S. landfall, happening on the barrier island there at South Texas. Also interesting, Harold replaces the name Harvey on the Atlantic tropical storm list. We are in the anniversary zone of Harvey, which had a great impact, of course, on Texas. And this becomes a weaker tropical storm, but the first of the season to show us the magnitude of warmth that we've got in the open waters of the Gulf. We had rapid intensification just before landfall, another illustration of just how warm waters can be impactful for tropical systems. If this storm had been moving much slower, spent much more time in the Atlantic, we might be talking about a stronger storm. But even the small indication and piece of evidence that we got of this storm hugging the coastline, look how rapidly things change for us, right? You went from a tropical storm named to landfall in less than 12 hours. And so very quick, and a rapid intensification right at the shoreline of jumping 5 miles an hour with wind intensity was another indication for us. And right now, the Gulf is the warmest that it has ever been in recorded history, an average of 88 degrees for the surface water temperatures of the Atlantic Gulf Coast. We are going to be going back out to Jason right now. He is in the area. He's right now. Tropical Storm Harold has made landfall. Jason is there on South Padre. He's on the island. Let's go to Jason right now. You can see him in the conditions. The winds are wild. There's a lot of rain coming down. Jason, what does it feel like as Tropical Storm Harold comes inland?
Well, Amy, right now the rain is pelting me in the face, and it actually hurts just a little bit here. And because of these intense winds, I mean, I can barely see maybe about a quarter of a mile away, in front of you. So, unfortunately, what we have seen here within about the past, we'll say about 20 to about 25 minutes, has been the winds have really intensified here. I mean, maybe they were gusting up to about 30, 40 miles per hour, but now we're seeing sustained winds anywhere from 40 to upwards of about 50 miles per hour. Again, the rain is really have been picking up here, with pelting us, unfortunately, in the face here. And this is what, we were unfortunately incredibly concerned about here. And this is why so many emergency responders have been saying for people to stay inside. Amy, back to you.
Wild conditions. You see Jason Frazier on Padre Island, where the winds are at 45 miles an hour. Tropical Storm Harold has made landfall in South Texas. This is a barrier island where you're seeing Jason take the brunt of those winds. Here's a look at the radar right now. Very heavy rain bands as well. With analysis on this at the expert desk, Stephen Morgan, we're looking at about 1 million people in the tropical storm warning area. Perhaps the best news of this is after we get past the barrier island, you start to see those heavier rain bands near the center of the storm and a secondary landfall, but moving towards an area that's not overly populated. We're still 50 miles south of Corpus Christi here.
Yeah, and there are a couple of state routes. I mean, being out on the road is an awful idea, let alone being out on a patio watching this thing move on shore. It's those sustained winds right off the ocean that are not at least being stopped by any land until they reach that barrier island. But we have State Route 77 here, which goes through rural Kennedy County. You head south and you'll eventually get into Port Mansfield. Corpus Christi right now, we are on pace to have one of our wettest days. I mean, we're at 1.5 inches and counting there. It's the wettest day in Corpus Christi since April 23rd. Back then, we saw a little more than 3 inches worth of rain. The wind gust, Amy, as you had mentioned, there was one buoy that had reported a wind gust of about 59 miles an hour. And in Corpus Christi, we just recently had a wind gust of 52 miles an hour. That's at the Naval Air Station. So the winds have been picking up. And when we look at the population and where most people live, it's right here in Corpus Christi. And coincidentally enough, when we consider the threat of any sort of storm surge, it's pretty weak. But we've got a pretty strong push right now of that onshore flow moving right into Corpus Christi Bay.
As the storm makes landfall, keep in mind that the National Hurricane Center reports that the tropical storm force winds do extend outward from the center of the storm 115 miles. That's a significant amount of space there to get a 40-mile-an-hour wind. So that's why you do have to wait until the storm gets less intense to get out and about. It might seem like a rain and wind storm without a lot of fanfare, but you still have a 40-mile-an-hour wind extending a good deal from the center. So you've got a couple of hours here until things really settle down. So if you're wondering, hey, can I get something in second half of the day for South Texas, I would wait it out, because even the eastern portion of South Texas might have a break for sundown a little later, but portions of West Texas still have to get through the risk of flash flooding. Even without the wind, they've got a lot of water to contend with before Harold makes his pass into the desert southwest of the U.S. So some of those buoy readings reporting the sustained winds right before landfall, that was a significant increase, and it also means that the wind field is still intact for at least, a couple more hours here for portions of South Texas. So I think that one of the key messages here that they give you from the National Hurricane Center in this discussion is we've still got moisture produced out of this storm, so you've got to make sure that you don't get isolated flash flooding issues coming in, and that I think is even a greater threat as we go throughout the day in the western portion of the state. But the timing on this does clear Corpus Christi on the exclusive Fox model here by about 2-3 o'clock. We've only got scattered showers in the area.
Couple of bays here, too, to watch. I know I had mentioned that Corpus Christi Bay is the one focus, and then we have just to the south, Baffin Bay. And we focus on that because there are a few towns, Loyola Beach, Riviera Beach, right along Baffin Bay. But, I mean, we're looking by this evening. This speaks to just how fast we're going to have Harold move on through. It's going to quickly move through South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley. They're going to pick up on their rain from Brownsville over to McAllen, Rio Grande City, Zapata. We have Laredo, Nuevo Laredo going to see that rain, and then it becomes more of an issue for the northern tip of Mexico and eventually West Texas. But as quickly as this thing moved in, and there are several things at play, and there's other things to talk about today, at least in the state of Texas. We've got an increasing pressure gradient here in South Texas. That is actually leading to a rare critical threat for some wildfires, and we haven't spent a lot of time today talking about that. We've been focused on this, but from Dallas into Waco, Killeen, Austin, Texas, this is I-35 today. It's a rare critical threat for fires. It's a pressure gradient again, and this high pressure that's farther to the north.
I mean, you had the governor of the state of Texas put out a disaster declaration earlier this month because of the heat and the dryness in his state, Lone Star State, with the fire danger, with the water restrictions, with the heat continuing in Dallas and Houston. Dallas has gone a month without rain. Houston has had triple-digit temperatures every day this month. Today, they might catch a break because of the drifting of clouds from Harold, but we really don't see any significant relief for any place except for South Texas out of Harold. So we're still in a drought, and you look north of San Antonio, and you have the exceptional highest form of drought. The wind concern there is significant. That is partially instigated by what's happening with Harold.
Yes.
Harold puts the squeeze on the high pressure to the north, and that's how you get the funneling of those winds. A tiny spark could just rapidly spread.
And you see exactly where we have that extreme and exceptional drought. It's right along that I-35 corridor. So winds don't start fires, but power lines, or let's just say any sort of spark that develops. It's such a contrast. We've been breaking records with heat, and we've back to 2011, and this morning we're talking about a landfalling tropical storm in South Texas, but the climate could not be more different. I mean, yeah, we're going to see some rain, Amy, as you had mentioned. It's not going to provide a ton of relief. We're back to the heat once this all exits,
all the
but
places
just to the
that
north.
need it don't get it.
They aren't.
You know, here, the line south is where you get the relief. San Antonio, Houston, Killeen, Dallas, Midland. These are areas that don't get it. Well, hey, we will be south of Midland even when we start to see what comes down the pike for Southwest Texas. And all these places that are in a deficit don't get any change or any relief, and 9 inches behind the mark for Dallas.
One more final point before we move on. Corpus Christi has that deficit you saw of 4.33 inches. It's possible that we make all that up with this storm system, but that's just one town. The others remain pretty dry.
We'll be watching it. Let's get a wider picture of what's going on in the Atlantic, because it is busy right now. We have 3 storms that are out in the Atlantic, and then we've got 2 disturbances. These other systems are not as impactful as Harold, right? It's grabbing the headlines right now. We got a lot of open water systems, but there is one to keep an eye on. It's a slow mover named Franklin. Here's the big picture. You get the Atlantic basin to get your bearings, and you see how active it is. Keep in mind, too, we are doing 7-day forecasts this season with the National Hurricane Center, so that is an expansive area of time where we're identifying potential systems for a longer period of time out. But if you go into Franklin, the storm that's been creeping at 3 miles per hour, this storm is impactful because it heads towards Hispaniola tomorrow. And that means we get a landfall from Franklin over Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. These are some areas that we're going to be watching, and it'll cross over the islands quickly, and it still goes back into open waters and has potential for more development. Still a lot to watch, but there's a look at Franklin. Kiana, when you break down this storm, this becomes the headline after Harold.
It sure does, and we'll continue to watch it. As you mentioned, Amy, it's going to be a storm that you really want to continue to listen out for, especially if you have travel plans, say, even into next week. We look at the current stats with Tropical Storm Franklin right now. 50-mile-per-hour winds. It's a slow mover, as you mentioned. It moved up a little bit from that 3 miles per hour to around 7 miles per hour, and the pressure is holding steady at just over 1,002 millibars. But it's going to continue to drive off towards the north. We can see where we have our cluster of showers and storms right now, and as we continue to watch it through, say, the next 24 to 48 hours, it drives off towards, say, areas like the Dominican Republic. We do have, again, a few watches in places for Turks and Caicos, as well as even Haiti. So we need to watch for that moving into this upcoming week. And as you can see, even taking us into Sunday, we're still going to be watching Franklin very closely. What happens after the Dominican Republic, it still remains to be a question, but there is still some, at least, possibility for re-strengthening with Franklin that we have to watch for heading into this week.
The fact that the Atlantic basin has become more lively speaks to the conditions out there supporting some action, but also keep in mind we have a very hostile environment that's suppressing any of these storms becoming exceptionally strong. You really can't discount the leftovers of Franklin once it goes over the islands, and you can see that there's some consensus right now, but the consensus involves a big bend in the track, which again gives you the wide variety of what could be potentially the remains of Franklin. I think this is something that we really pay attention to over extremely warm waters. It only takes one storm to sneak past these hostile environments that are trying to suppress storm formation. So that's why you have to watch a season like this so very, very closely. I mean, Stephen, when you're looking at this, we know the storm goes back into waters that would support it. It will be the look at shear, the look at the steering winds that then start to impact what the leftovers do.
Yeah, the Caribbean right now is sort of off limits. It's remarkable that we've seen Franklin hang on as much. I was diving into the discussion from the Hurricane Center, and the Hurricane Center saying it's unclear if Franklin still has a well-defined center of circulation. And so, Seth, if we go back to those models that kind of put where the center of circulation might be, look at how they are initialized. They're all over the map. There is not a clear definition. Check that out. I know we have the tropical storm icon overlaid, but where's it at? And there's some indication that maybe that low-level spin is a little bit displaced to the west. And these tropical systems can do it. I mean, we saw it even with Harold this morning. As you get additional storms that develop in the open waters, you'll naturally maybe start to see a different low-level circulation. So once we figure out where that center is, and once it kind of decides, then we'll be able to really more confidently say, okay, how is it going to handle the rugged terrain of the Dominican Republic? And then what will it do as it moves just to the east of the Bahamas? But this is a storm to watch, because that zone, Amy, as you mentioned, would be favorable for some strengthening, but we're still about 4, 5, 6 days away from there.
Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ, South Texas, with live team coverage continues as Tropical Storm Harold makes landfall, the first Atlantic storm of the season to have a U.S. landfall. We have live vantage points with Fox Weather Camera Network showing you roads leading to South Padre Island. Wet and worked over. You see the palm trees are still with a little wiggle in them. We're going to see those winds diminish as the storm goes further inland. Schools and work schedules did get delayed for the first half of the day for Corpus Christi. Then a look at Dallas. Dallas left out of Harold's moisture. In fact, they've been a month without rain. Fort Worth is really just thirsty for anything. We could have delays at the airports, though, so keep in mind travel could be questionable for Texas because of this storm making landfall. Corpus Christi with some delays, as well as Houston. Hobby will track this storm through Texas, and it then becomes a part of the desert Southwest and potential flooding. We'll be following it. Weather Command will be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ, where we have continuing coverage all day of Harold. Tropical Storm Harold has made landfall in South Texas, bringing soaking rain and wind. The impact is not going to end there. The leftovers of Harold will actually stream into the southwestern U.S. This could even be a bigger headline than Harold making landfall itself. First, the latest details. We have Tropical Storm Harold is a 50-mile-an-hour wind moving at 21 miles an hour west-northwest. It's about 50 miles south of Corpus Christi, making landfall. You can see the outer bands swinging through. Padre Island is the location of landfall just before 10 a.m. Central Time, and it did make it as a tropical storm with 998 millibar pressure. All right, looking at this impact here, once the storm comes inland, winds will diminish, but the wind field for tropical storm force winds does extend about 100 miles outside of the center, so you do have to be prepared where the tropical storm warnings are up. You want to know that the winds can still come in and be gusty, so you don't completely discount the storm as it makes its way inland. Right now, some of the buoys are still reading 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts, and we're going to see the storm make its way over a less populated area as its secondary landfall there along the coastline is what we're expecting, and then continue to make its way across South Texas as a very beneficial rainfall. Here's your track of Tropical Storm Harold. By the way, tomorrow morning it'll be a depression. The leftovers of it are what we track into the southwestern U.S. Let's talk about this, though, because when you get moisture feeding across Mexico here with the ability to get caught up in the pattern that coincides with the monsoon, you start to have a flow of moisture going into the southwest that's an eyebrow raiser. There's flood threat from this. Now, there are some areas that have been particularly vulnerable through the southwest. Don't forget, we just had Hillary, a Pacific tropical system, come through. And even places that got robbed because Hillary didn't spread that much into Arizona could be seeing another tropical system bring a flash flood threat. And it extends all the way through Cedar City, Utah. You see the northerly flow up into Salt Lake? That is a situation where it's dangerous this time of year. Cedar City, with all the national parks there, from Zion to Bryce Canyon to Capitol Reef, are still packed with people doing the hiking through the canyons. And we are just 5 days out from Cedar City, already seeing very serious flooding that came through that portion of southern Utah. It extends down into the Grand Canyon, where we see a high flood risk, likely flash flooding coming in from this system. Let's track it because, I mean, there are several, Kiana, spots here that could get it. I mean, coming out of Texas, maybe El Paso gets a little bit?
Absolutely. El Paso being one of those cities, Cedar City, as you mentioned, being another. Salt Lake City could even see some of these impacts as well. So we are looking at a good chance for some of this rain to even impact desert Southwest. Last thing they need, they just had a bit of Hillary's rain push through over the weekend. We look at an example here from Flagstaff, and we'll use your forecast with our Fox model through the next couple of days as an example. That rain meeting you by tomorrow afternoon. 4 p.m. in the afternoon, we're looking at rain over I-17 as well as I-4. Flagstaff continues that even into early Thursday morning with a few scattered showers and storms pushing through. So again, all of this rain is going to add up. And remember, areas like Flagstaff really have been dry over the summer months. It's going to take some time for this rain to really get absorbed. The ground there is already so hard. It's the desert Southwest to begin with, and we've been missing out on opportunities of rain, given that the monsoon season has been delayed. Looking at Phoenix, another area that hasn't really seen much rain, you'll get it on a couple of inches, maybe an inch at best, but we need to watch for any possible flooding as we head through this upcoming week as well.
Yeah, Flagstaff and Phoenix getting a better look at tropical moisture than they did from Hillary, because it kind of got skipped from Hillary. Now you've got a secondary tropical system coming into the southwest. This one does not impact California, and thankfully, because they need a break. We do get back-to-back flows of tropical systems coming in, but California is not in the same area as where Harold's moisture is going. In fact, on the West Coast, it's all about cleanup efforts that are underway. We're watching what Hillary left behind, the devastation in some Florida communities, including Cathedral City. They had one of the worst impacts from Hillary's wrath with mudslides. You can see people there being rescued. They actually had first responders go in with bulldozers to clear debris. 46 people had to be rescued. They were trapped behind this mudslide. 3 inches of rain in Palm Springs was a record setter. It brought all this moisture there to the Palm Desert region, and people were impacted. This was a serious scenario that unfolded. Let's get on the ground. Fox Weather's Nicole Valdez is in the area that was hardest hit. Nicole, I-10 finally reopens after everything has been repaired and removed, but Cathedral City is far from business as usual.
Amy, it's no exaggeration that what you're looking at is unbelievable here in Cathedral City. Take a look at just how deep the mud goes here. I'm standing in it several inches, nearly reaching my knees here, and it's still very moist. You'll notice all the water that's sort of sitting on top of all this mud. And as I try to take a couple steps, you'll notice that my boots just kind of stay at the bottom here. Take a look at the visuals. I mean, these cars just trapped in here, completely covered nearly the entire tire in mud, and it goes on for really several blocks. You'll notice there are people who are essentially still trapped in their homes as they wait for the bulldozers who have been out since first light, really tried to get as much of it off of the roads to make it so that these people can leave. Thankfully, a lot of people say they've got some supplies, so it's either they're in their house and just kind of waiting for that work to happen, but some we've seen have sort of made the brave trek, rolled up their jeans, and just had to sort of try to trudge through this very difficult situation. This is the case here, but Yesterday, what we saw was a lot more of really a painful image, and that was nearly 50 people that had to be put onto the forklifts that are being used today to move all of this mud to even get out of their homes. A local home care center. This is a situation that people here have said they've never seen before. They've had flooding, they've had standing water, but the mud itself is really what's taken a lot of people by surprise. And of course, as it is mud, not water, officials recognizing that the cleanup here is going to take that much longer.
From the rescue phase to now the recovery phase, and it'll start to be cleanup. There's sinkholes back there. There's still standing mud of up to 5 feet. And so there's going to be, the days to come, there's still going to be a lot of recovery efforts.
And you notice all that mud and those trapped cars goes on for really as far as the eye can see on this particular road. We're not far from the I-10 that is thankfully now reopened, but you'll take a look right here. Some folks who live in this community essentially just having to do whatever they can to get out, to get to their families, to get supplies, to get through what could be a very difficult next few days as they wait for crews to try to make a dent on the amount of mud that has caked their neighborhood. Amy.
Oh dear, I wonder if she needs help. I don't know why they have to be out in that. What a terrible scenario. If I'm understanding correctly, Nicole, the homes behind you, people cannot get out into their cars, so they're basically hostage in their own home until this mud can be moved out of the way. And the footage that you showed us was shocking. It appeared as though they were taking first responders with a bulldozer in to get those people out. This is quite a scenario.
It really is, and you're right. I mean, I hate to see people do what this woman is doing. I'm sure she's, trying to get somewhere and be okay. Are you okay? Do you need any help?
I was able to go through to a house.
You used an airboat? Huh? Did you? I'm sorry. Did you say you used a boat?
No. I was supposed to go to the house.
She's trying to get to her house.
Because we left that yesterday, and I can't go through. It's really.
Oh gosh, wow. Yeah, she just mentioned to me she's trying to get back home, but unfortunately she tried to make the trek and just wasn't able to make it, Amy. So that's an example right there of somebody who's, they got out of their home. Now she's trying to get back in, clearly to get something that she needs out of there. But the situation is so dire. Until those bulldozers can clear this, they're essentially stuck.
What a situation. Fox Weather's Nicole Valdez in Cathedral City with the cleanup that's ongoing from Hillary making landfall. Thanks, Nicole, for that report. Everyone stay safe out there as you cover the recovery. Wow, what a situation that's happened there. Rest of America currently in the hottest week of the year. We're on top of already a scorching summer. Kiana's tracking some of this heat. 100 million Americans under heat alerts. This is shocking to look at how many people are dealing with very hot temperatures this late into August.
And that's exactly right, Amy. And we are going to be rounding out summer very quickly, but we do have kids going back to school. They're going back to those outdoor sport practices. And this is what we have to deal with. Our hottest temperatures on record throughout this upcoming week. We'll look at a couple of areas as we go through this week that are under those heat alerts. They do include the upper Midwest, surprisingly, going into this upcoming week as well. We're looking at areas like Wisconsin to see some of those heat alerts, as well as even parts of Illinois. Chicago's getting in on the warm temperatures for today. We look at some of the other areas across the Northeast as well. While we are rounding out, again, the summer, we're looking at temperatures that are going to be in the upper 80s and 90s, feeling like triple digits. We have the heat alerts up for you now. This is not for one day. This is not for 2 days. It takes us through the middle and end of the week with millions feeling these temperatures. By Thursday, 173 million people will be dealing with the heat, and it is because of this stagnant weather pattern. We have a high pressure system locked in central portions of the country. It has allowed for that jet stream to move off towards the north, and some of that heat will filter into the upper Midwest this time around. Really expansive from the southern plains through the upper Midwest back towards the southeast, all of these areas getting in on these summer-like temperatures as it's really locked into place. And we'll continue to see that through this upcoming week as well. A lot of areas will be seeing temperatures for the next couple of days in the 90s, feel like temperatures in the triple digits. We'll use Omaha, Nebraska as an example. Through the latter half of the afternoon, we really see our feel like temperatures peak at around 117 degrees. Look at what happens by 11 p.m. tonight. It still feels like 99 degrees in Omaha, Nebraska. So that heat's in place, and it's expanding farther north as well through this upcoming week. Today, we also see our heat index stretch all the way up towards, say, Minneapolis. Feel like temperature at 112. It's still a bit cool over towards Chicago for today, but we see temperatures rising as we head into tomorrow. St. Louis, not the case for you, and over towards Little Rock, 110 as your feel like temperature for today as well. So the heat is really the talker through this week into tomorrow, as well as even into Thursday. We'll continue to watch all of that for you in this upcoming week here at Fox Weather.
So many people are struggling in the heat, Kiana. I mean, you have much of the country looking at oppressive temperatures pushing record territory. We have 30 gauges by the time we get to Friday that could be flirting with the record books. There's the exception of the East Coast. A couple cities there have been able to escape the worst of the heat.
Yes, Philadelphia being one of those cities, the city of brotherly love, actually looking at one of their coolest summers in the last 15 years. We bring up, again, a couple of other areas that you may have seen as well. But looking out towards Philadelphia, it looks like a nice, calm, sunny day here. Not the hottest day. We actually see a light breeze with the flags there off in the distance. So not looking too bad along the I-95 corridor for the city of brotherly love. We look at some of the stats here from the summer. As, again, I mentioned, we're looking at one of our coolest summers, or actually our coolest summer within the last 15 years. Looking at some of the numbers here for the month of June, we really felt those temperatures. A lot of our days were actually below average. Each and every blue box that you see got a bit warmer in July. The first week of July was the warmest, and then we saw some of those blues starting to pop back up. And now as we round out summer in Philadelphia, it looks like August is going to be one of those months where we really have a toss-up. Half of the month was warm, and the other half of the month was a bit cooler. Today, we also see that in areas like New York City and Washington, D.C. We top out in the 80s. It is late August. Heading up towards Bangor and into Boston, 75 degrees for you. Pittsburgh, 79. Cincinnati gets very close to 90 degrees for today with plenty of sunshine. But again, the cooler temperatures are sticking around. It's all about that stagnant weather pattern that we've been talking about. Well, it looks like the heat is aiming towards the upper Midwest this week. And don't forget, you can download the Fox Weather app and stream Fox Weather from your favorite TV-connected device. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to Weather Command. Kiana Lewis, Stephen Morgan, and Amy Freeze, along with the Fox Weather team, continuing coverage. Tropical Storm Harold is the first Atlantic season storm to make landfall on the U.S. coastline. That is Right there, Jason Frazier, who is dealing at Padre Island with the storm as it has come inland and the outer rain bands. We do have continuing coverage with Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker Mark Sudduth as well in Corpus Christi. Here on the desk, we join the team behind the scenes to track Harold all day. You can download the Fox Weather app and stream with us. That is a visual of Padre Island, the barrier island, where we saw Harold make landfall. Secondary landfall occurring on the main line, the main coastal line there for Texas. You get all of these vantage points, and that barrier island takes the brunt of a surge. Not a big one coming with Harold, but you cannot stop the wind and the rain, which is exactly what we're seeing. By the way, the surf less than a 3-foot surge. Let's get into it right now. We have Fox Weather's Jason Frazier in Padre Island, where the storm has made landfall. These are wicked conditions. The rain still coming down and the winds ripping apart. Basically, it looks like your hoodie's on sideways because the winds are so strong.
Yeah, absolutely. We continue to see the winds gusting between 40 to about 50 miles per hour. About a half hour ago, we saw the winds gusting all the way up to 54 miles per hour here on Padre Island. And as a result of that, we've also been seeing the rain has been moving sideways here. Part of the reason why I have to stand slightly towards the camera this way is because the rain is moving this way, and it just will hurt your face as it hits you here. Now, the winds are going to continue to be a big issue here on Padre Island for at least the next hour or two. The good news with Tropical Storm Harold is that it has picked up with the speed there. So the National Hurricane Center basically saying that Harold right now is moving at about 21 miles west-northwest here. So the good news is earlier this morning we had anticipated that some parts of Texas could pick up on anywhere between 5 to 7 inches of rain. Those totals are likely going to be going slightly downward because the storm is going to be moving quicker here. Now, for many people, I know that, you may want to go outside and maybe experience this. I would highly recommend that you not do that because whenever the wind really kicks up, it is going to be so difficult to drive and so difficult to even walk out here. And we have been continuing to see these winds. They have just been picking up. They have just been relentless. They have just been nonstop here. This is part of the reason why schools over in the Corpus Christi area, which is about 15 minutes north of where I am, they have been closed for the day. We've had other schools that have been that have undergone a 2-hour delay, but some parents are basically saying on social media that they need to go and get their kids here. Bottom line, let this storm exit your area. That should be happening here within about the next hour or two here in the Corpus Christi area. And then, Amy, we're expecting things to move westward here, impacting places like Del Rio and the rest western portions of Texas, and then shifting into Mexico.
Jason Frazier on Padre Island, where the highest wind gust has been 54 miles an hour. We go a little bit further to the north, Corpus Christi right now, reporting at Texas A&M campus there, Corpus Christi, a 60-mile-an-hour wind. So we still do have some powerful winds extending from the center of this storm. Let's get to Mark Sudduth, Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker. Mark is in Corpus Christi Bay, a little bit further north. A look at the surf behind you. It's certainly kicked up now that we have landfall.
Oh, absolutely. I went up to the hotel here just a little bit ago to take a break, and in that time period, it made landfall. The intense rain band has come in. The bay here has really jumped up. Our remote cam down there really doing its job, taking it in the face, but that's what that is for. I can't stand down there. There's no way. And my equipment would get ruined. It's not safe. And speaking of driving around, I'm glad Jason mentioned that. I was contemplating going down south on 77. I've been in a lot of these, and I thought, you know what? It's not safe. And if somebody's been doing this as long as I have said it's not safe, just stay put.
We saw a rapid intensification just off the shoreline. That gave us a pickup in winds, Mark. You're seeing that reflected in the gauges right now, where we're seeing 55, 60-mile-an-hour winds in some pockets. The wind field for tropical storm force winds, that expands at least 100 miles from the center of the storm. That'll shove some of the waves on shore. It'll also mean that inland, you could get some trees down, branches, power lines. It could create some gusts that create problems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In the more intense rain bands, you do typically get stronger winds. The more intense the convection or the thunderstorm activity, more efficient at bringing those winds down to the surface. And that's impossible to forecast for a small area. So yes, as this moves inland quickly, there will be problems spreading with it, but at least it is moving fast enough to not be a major flood threat for Texas.
When you look at what you've seen in the last week, now an Atlantic landfall of a tropical storm. We also had the tropical storm Hillary impacting the west from the Pacific Basin. What a storm week that you've been able to get vantage points on. The ground truth and the eyewitness cameras that bring these pictures to people are so important to speak to the power of the storm. Such an active week for you. What have been your impressions of both of these systems? 2 H storms in 1 week.
Yeah. Well, certainly still trying to wrap my brain around all that I have done in just the last several days. I left North Carolina Friday. Now I'm here in Corpus Christi, Texas, with a stop in Palm Springs and Cathedral City along the way for a West Coast tropical system. And, want to just make sure people understand this is only, what are we up to, August 23rd? We have a long way to go this hurricane season. Things should be active, that is expected to be active. We are seeing what we thought would happen happening, and we have a ways to go. Not trying to scare people, but it is something to be aware of as we go forward. We're just getting started with the climatological ramping up of the hurricane season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Historically, when you talk about named storm activity, we're heading into the peak. And the piece of evidence I think that we get from Harold as a tropical storm and at a very quick mover, within 12 hours we had a landfall, is that we saw that rapid intensification in a quick moving storm that didn't have a lot of time out in the open waters of a very warm Gulf. So great point to make there. Stay safe during the storm there as you continue to monitor the landfall of Tropical Storm Harold. Thanks so much. Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker, Mark Sudduth in Corpus Christi Bay. Let's talk about the impacts of the storm coming inland. I mean, you future track this out, Kiana, and there are places in West Texas that could have worse flooding than the landfall.
And that's exactly right. And I think that's what's more so concerning as we head through the next couple of days. Know that if you are in West Texas, at least the next 24 hours or so, you will be feeling these impacts through the latter half of today and into the start of tomorrow. As you know, Harold continues to move off towards the west. We're beyond the landfall. We could see actually some clearing behind Harold for parts of Corpus Christi, but it's the west side of Texas moving into Mexico and then back into, say, the northwestern side of Texas that gets in on that heavier rain. 2 to 3 inches of rain expected in areas shaded in the yellow. We even have some pockets of orange that are popping up off of the screen as well. So could locally see some higher amounts of rain. Here's a look at how things pan out by tomorrow afternoon and evening. We're looking at Fort Stockton over towards, say, Stony Butte and down towards Marfa. These are going to be areas that are still under flood alerts into our Wednesday afternoon and evening, and it's simply because of how slow and downgraded Harold's going to become. So we get in on an abundance of rain as we head into, say, our Wednesday and even into a part of Thursday for the desert Southwest.
Yeah, interesting to show, along with the track that you just explained and where those threats are, the moisture that gets dragged out of the Gulf. I mean, when you look at this, the question people are going to be looking at, Stephen, saying, what in the world? The desert Southwest gets a Pacific storm coming in from the tropics and now an Atlantic storm from the tropics coming in. How does that Gulf moisture in the Atlantic end up over Flagstaff, Arizona? It's a bizarre setup.
It is a bizarre setup. We do have a little bit of monsoon influence too, so that's already getting tapped, and that's more so moisture right from the Pacific. But then, yeah, when you've got a ridge of high pressure, and the setup does have to favor that, we've got this ridge of high pressure, which has been producing some of the most intense heat we have seen all season long in a lot of these cities, but that's going to keep that focus of rich moisture through the Four Corners region. So it's possible that I would say people who missed out on it more, New Mexico, southern New Mexico is finally going to get in on some of this action. That's nice. I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves too much, but let's watch Death Valley. Even Las Vegas, perhaps we didn't see the amount of rain in Vegas proper, which Hillary threatened to bring, but now we have Harold and the remnants that could bring even more rain to Vegas. So it's another story of the month of August being an exceptionally dry month on climate records, and we have another tropical system bringing in that moisture. It's an important thing for this part of the country, especially when the monsoon has sort of been trending more of a disappointment this season.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch the second half of the weekend unfold and also into the early part of the weekend, because Friday into Saturday, look how the moisture spreads into the Front Range of Colorado, breaking down that ridge and allowing at least portions of the west central plains start to get some relief from the heat. That'll be something that we watch very carefully as well. So pay attention. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ. We are tracking not only the tropics, but also following up with what's happening in Maui. The president in the wildfire zone today, making a stop there. The federal government has been helping. They've had 1,000 people on the ground. Fox Weather's Robert Ray is in Maui on the island as the search continues for the missing. Fox Weather will be right back.
President Biden and the First Lady here in Maui on Monday, touring the unspeakable damage of the town of Lahaina, looking at the burned out neighborhoods and vehicles. Meanwhile, the search for the missing continues as federal responders are on the ground still identifying the remains of the dead. We'll have more coming right up.
I'm Brian Norcross with a Hurricane HQ Minute. What the heck is the ITCZ? That stands for the Intertropical Convergence Zone, and it's a feature that's in the Atlantic every hurricane season, and it can hinder or help hurricane development. To understand what's going on, let's look at the wide view. Well, you know about the Bermuda High over the Atlantic. That's what brings summertime weather to the east coast of the U.S. Well, in the southern hemisphere, you also have a high-pressure system, but it rotates the opposite direction. It's called the St. Helena High. And where those converge, what do you get? You get a general rotation in that area from that converging wind, and that converging wind produces a band of showers and thunderstorms. Well, that rotation with the showers and thunderstorms can actually get a spinning system going or enhance a spinning system where those winds collide. And sometimes there are so many areas spinning in the ITCZ that a tropical disturbance has trouble establishing spin of its own, which it needs to develop. It moves north in the summer and south in the winter because it is a monsoon kind of thing. And now you know. Stay with Hurricane HQ this hurricane season. Download the Fox Weather app now.
Well, welcome back to Weather Command. Fox Weather, your hurricane. You got to look at Hillary there. Once a Category 4 hurricane, made its way to Southern California, then as a tropical storm for the first time in 3 decades, impacting the southern part of California. Satellite shows just how intense this storm cranked up rapidly in the eastern Pacific. Rare setup, allowing the storm to be steered up the Mexican coastline, driving across the southern border. When you look at the track of the storm, taking all of this energy, very potent. We had a rapid intensification, but a rapid weakening, leaving behind the moisture. Hillary making landfall, the Baja west coastline, they're about 150 miles outside of Ensenada, pushed through Tijuana, a lot of mudslides there. And then the center of the storm moved over San Diego and the Coachella Valley, squeezing right through the mountains east of L.A., and Hillary became the first tropical cyclone to make landfall in North America this year. Beatrice got real close to coastal Mexico, but Hillary will go down in the books. And known for its flooding rain. I mean, you look at the impacts for the low deserts, for the mountains, for the dry sloping mountains, the eastern side there, and also some very significant impacts from the coastal cities of Mexico. Some of these towns saw 70% of their average yearly rain. Some saw an entire year's worth. Palm Springs got 3¼ inches of rain from Hillary. That was enough for the record books. Stephen, when you take a look at the comparison of what this storm did, first and foremost, I think the shock of Southern California getting a tropical system was something people hadn't seen in their entire lifetime, because the last direct hit was 1939. We've had tropical leftovers. That was back in '97 with Nora, but a direct hit from Long Beach to San Diego would have taken us back to 1939. All
of those points, too, that you made, they all stand out, and they're all major points. We don't want to ignore the fact that this thing did rapidly intensify. And when we talk about hurricane seasons in America, we focus oftentimes on the Atlantic basin, but our first one, at least in North America, was on the Eastern Pacific. It was impressive to see. When we talk about the rain, too, and more data coming in, notably in Death Valley, that number up now, officially 2.2 inches worth of rain at the Furnace Creek reporting station. We've got records in Death Valley that date back to 1911. It was the newest, wettest day on record. Previously, it was just back on August of 2022, where we saw 1.7 inches, but now that's exactly to their yearly average. I mean, to the hundredths of an inch. Death Valley sees 2.20 inches each year, and they got that with one event. It was a one-day total. I mean, that really speaks to it.
For us, we know the numbers for the region, so it's shocking. But if you talk about 2 inches and you tell people in Miami, we got 2 inches, it really did a number on us. It wouldn't make any sense. Kiana, look back to this graphic that shows us the amount of rain that we saw from Hillary in Palm Springs, and then comparative to big cities like Miami, New York, Seattle, Chicago. If they got 70%. Yeah.
You know, they're laughing at this number. And, you know, we would see 47 inches in its 70% of the yearly rainfall total in areas like Miami. The Northeast, as well as even the upper Midwest, gets in on these active amounts of rain throughout the year. It's not the case in the West Coast. So when we see not only a tropical storm, something first of its kind, for parts of Southern California, we're getting in on some really remarkable rain totals as well.
So for Palm Springs, they got this. For Chicago, it would be like getting 26 inches of rain if you had a Hillary come through and getting 70% from one storm. Just a wild comparison there. But nonetheless, Hillary will definitely go down in the books.
We need help right now. The whole island needs help, but especially the side of the island from all the way from Lahaina all the way up north. You know, all of our community needs to come together and not be divided and, you know, band together because we need each other.
Fox Weather bringing you the voices, the people of Maui, as they gathered outside Kapola Airport in Lahaina. President Joe Biden arriving on the island 2 weeks after the devastating fire began. The president got a look firsthand at the aftermath, the devastation that happened in Lahaina. Fox Weather's Robert Ray is in Maui. Leaders often go to disaster zones like this, Robert. They're going to offer federal support and compassion. You were there when the president spoke, Robert.
Yeah, good morning to you, Amy. President and Joe Biden here yesterday, spending quite a few hours here. To be honest with you, I was surprised at how long they were on the ground in Lahaina, and then met with other locals and officials. The governor of Hawaii touring the area and making remarks. He did not speak to the media, but take a look at his journey yesterday.
Faith sees best in the dark.
President Joe Biden expressing heartache and hope in front of a crowded room of wildfire survivors and first responders on Monday. This after the commander-in-chief and first lady spent the day witnessing the devastation on Maui, where they met with community members and local leaders.
This is the deadliest natural disaster that Hawaii has ever seen, and as a result, this is the biggest federal response that Hawaii has ever seen.
The fire that engulfed Lahaina has made the historic town unrecognizable to those who call it home. President Biden promising survivors who remain fearful for the town's future that the recovery process will focus on respecting their land and culture.
We're going to get it done for you, but get it done the way you want it done, not get it done somebody else's way.
More than 100 people have been confirmed dead, but as of Monday night, more than 800 are still unaccounted for.
Only thing worse than losing someone is not sure whether you've lost someone.
While most survivors have been moved out of shelters and into more permanent housing, President Biden says he knows what's been lost can never be fully replaced.
From that ring he gave you when you were 19 years old, from that special letter that came for your son or your daughter, the little things.
More than 1,000 federal officials are in Maui assisting with the recovery efforts, and over $8 million in aid has been given to roughly 8,000 families. Meanwhile, lawsuits are beginning to the utility companies. President Biden was told yesterday also that the search could continue for 2 more weeks for any human remains in the historic town of Lahaina, as the number right now sits at 115. That came out yesterday by the county of Maui. We are told, over 800 people that are missing, though I did talk to a federal source yesterday evening, and he told me that he thinks that number is probably more in the 500 mark, which is hopeful. Good news. The bad news is that President Biden was also told that there may be some of the human remains that they cannot identify with a name because the technology, forensics, is just not there yet to do. It shows you how much a town and human beings were incinerated. Just awful, Amy.
It really is heartbreaking, Robert, and the only thing that allows you to believe something like that is when you start to see the pictures and how nothing is left of Lahaina. That allows you to almost comprehend why that would be the case. Fox Weather's Robert Ray, live in Maui. Thank you for your report and your coverage. America is facing the hottest week of the year so far. Extreme heat remains dominant. Kiana's got a look at weather across the country.
I sure do. We'll start off in the northeast, where actually we're getting in on cool conditions, probably one of the only areas that are seeing some cooler conditions for the start of this work week. And through this work week, we have lower humidity in places as well as cooler and drier temperatures as we look at those temperatures today. 80s across that I-95 corridor from New York down towards D.C. A bit cooler up towards, say, Syracuse and into Pittsburgh. It starts to get hot over towards Cincinnati, one of the areas that will be getting in on that warmer air due to this area of high pressure that's stretching from the south throughout parts of the upper Midwest. It's taking hold across the southeast as well. We look at our temperatures here in the upper 90s. Atlanta 98, 95 in Jacksonville, 91 in Miami, 97 back towards New Orleans. And we'll watch the Gulf Coast really closely because we are still watching Tropical Storm Harold. That's taking aim at parts of southern Texas, bringing in heavy rain from the South Texas area over towards the West Texas area. Elsewhere, we're talking temperatures once again. Dallas sunny with 105 as your high number for today. Kansas City 98, up towards Chicago 82, Rapid City 99. And heading back towards the West Coast, we're still looking at chances of rain that's going to continue for today. A lot of that moisture still hanging through as the remnants of Hillary continues to track off towards the north. We'll look at rain from really the north to the south. We'll also see some of Harold's moisture start to impact parts of the desert Southwest as well. And that's the weather across America. We'll take a look at that as we go through the course of today. Remember, you can download the Fox Weather app and stream Fox Weather from your favorite connected TV device as well. Weather Command will be right back after this break.
everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Fox Weather. I'm Jay Minar. Top story right now, Tropical Storm Harold hammering South Texas. Powerful wind and heavy rain is set to flood the state. It's a dangerous situation on the coast and inland. We've already seen at least one tornado warning, with more hazards coming as the day goes on. Now we have Fox Weather team coverage in South Texas, and we'll get you out to Jason Frazier in just a minute. But first, I want to get you caught up on the latest of the storm and where it's going. Gusty wind, damaging wind even at that. Also, too, flooding rain is impacting Corpus Christi at this hour. The worst of those rain bands just pushing on shore. Harold making landfall just a little over an hour ago. But here's the latest stats, 50-mile-per-hour winds. Now, with that onshore landfall, we are anticipating weakening of the structure of this storm as the hours go on, but the rain still rings out. Moving off to the west-northwest at 21 miles per hour. It was that quick forward speed that did boost up the winds of Harold just a touch before landfall on Padre Island. Pressure there about 958 millibars. Now here's the latest on the landfall. Landfall about 9:50 in the morning Central Time. Padre Island, Texas took the hit. Tropical storm strength. And we did have those 50-mile-per-hour max sustained winds. So a little bit of that forward speed did boost up the storm. Here's a look at our watches and warnings. Of course, tropical storm warning has been posted there. That's expected to continue through the day today, as winds are still picking up around these bands. Even bands all the way up, into Bay City are expected to bring wind gusts upwards of, say, 40 to 50 miles per hour. We're seeing some pretty strong wind gusts even at the Texas A&M Corpus Christi college campus there, as we've gone over really the second half of the morning. Flash flooding certainly a possibility here in South Texas. That likelihood for Corpus Christi down to Brownsville, out westward, right along the Mexico border. Notice that it's south of our major cities like San Antonio and Houston, which desperately need the rain, but really, Harold, a quick hit to South Texas. But any way you look at it, this rain is a really good thing. We do have flood warnings, of course, so with that in mind, be very aware of being out on the roads. This flash flood warning is going to continue until 12:45 local time. It does include downtown Corpus Christi, right along the coast there, for estimated rain up to 2 to 3 inches so far. A couple pockets maybe closer to 4 or 5 inches, but overall, pretty high confidence that the coast has seen a lot of rain since early this morning. Storm reports coming in from Corpus Christi shows that there are roads with standing water on them. In fact, the northwest loop of Highway 286 was flooded out. And so it is going to be a dangerous situation as these rain bands continue to push their way through. Wind gusts right now up to, say, 30 to 50 miles per hour. Downtown Corpus Christi, a gust up to 56. And then down into Brownsville, not taking as much of a harder hit. It's really so that northeasterly side of Harold that we're going to get the worst of those winds, that push of the water there, of course. Here's a look at the exclusive Fox model. Now, with Harold moving so quickly across South Texas, the heaviest of the rain is going to move out of Corpus Christi, start to push into the western border there. Laredo up into Crystal City, getting that heavier rain pushing through. But with a quick mover, the rain should almost be out of our hair before the end of the day today. Here's the dinner hour, 6 o'clock, and you've got these showers pushing off into northern Mexico, and we do get a break with maybe some lingering showers as we go into the overnight. But either way you look at it, this is good rain for Texas. This isn't anything that Texas can't handle, but of course we're with you along the way with team coverage. Well, Harold made landfall on Padre Island, Texas this morning, and the South Texas coast is getting rain whipped by the tropical storm. The storm carrying so much moisture, 3 to 5 inches of rain is expected. Fox Weather's Jason Frazier is live on Padre Island. Jason, you've been riding out the storm all morning. How's it feel now compared to when that landfall came through?
Well, when it originally came through, we saw the winds gusting up to right around 55 miles per hour. Right now, we've had some intermittent wind, but we still have some isolated time periods where those winds are really rocking and rolling here. I mean, you can really hear that against the mic here. Unfortunately, with these winds comes a whole lot of rain, and that's been impacting the visibility here as well. That is part of the reason why several schools in the area, in the Corpus Christi area, area closed for the day. We've also had other schools that did have a 2-hour delay. City officials encouraging people to stay at home here. Now, there's also been a concern for some minor coastal flooding, anywhere between 1 to about 3-foot swells here. Now, one of the other things I did want to point out is at the top of the show here on Fox Weather First, I noticed that before Harold had originally walked, or I should say, when Harold came in, it was very hot. It was very soupy outside. But as these outer rain bands moved through there, the temperatures continued to drop here. So I would estimate that the temperature right now is in the 70s. It's cool. It's been a relief here. But, you know, Jane, the good news is southern portions of Texas, they needed the rain. But the downside is, unfortunately, we could see some spots with some flooding.
Yeah, and, you know, as you know, with flooding, it's always encouraging officials taking it seriously, trying to keep people home. Hope things are riding out. I'm sure the cooler temperatures in Texas are also welcome. Jason, I'll let you get inside. I know it's tough being out there, but we appreciate your coverage, of course, all morning. And we've got team coverage in South Texas coming up this hour. We've got our Fox Weather's Katie Byrne also to check in with. But, you know, while, of course, Fox Weather's your hurricane HQ and hurricane season is proving to be a busy one this week, elsewhere in the tropics, we have Tropical Storm Franklin, already bringing rain and wind to the Dominican Republic. Here's a look at Punta Cana. Normally an island destination, now bearing down for tropical storm conditions. Tropical storm warnings extend across the island of Hispaniola, including both the DR and Haiti. Here's a look at Tropical Storm Franklin's latest stats. We have 50-mile-per-hour winds. Gradual strengthening is expected to happen. However, with the timeline of Franklin, likely will make a landfall as a tropical storm somewhere along Hispaniola, whether that be Haiti, Dominican Republic. You have those tropical storm warnings on the southward facing beaches. You get up to the north side of the Dominican Republic on the islands there. Tropical storm watch even up into the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. This as Franklin continues to push northward. Here's a look at the satellite imagery. It looks quite healthy. Now, we're missing that clear eye, so, you know, the structure of this storm still trying to come together. It's sitting in some really warm waters, but you can see some of that deeper convection that's beginning to bubble up there near where the center sits. Now, we take a look at where the rain is falling, most of which is just off to the east of the Dominican Republic, even portions of Puerto Rico getting in on really some much needed shower activity. But the worst of the heaviest rain is going to come through over the next, say, 24 to 48 hours. Now, water temperatures are incredibly warm, and this system was one to watch. It's sat over the Lesser Antilles this weekend, slowly moved westward as was anticipated. And in these warmer waters in the 80s, it's really no surprise we've been able to see that strengthen. Now, as Franklin pushes north over the Dominican Republic, look at the rain totals that we see get wrung out near Santo Domingo, nearly 18 to 24 inches. Now, I want to keep in mind, portions of western DR are filled with mountainous terrain. And so a lot of this is terrain-induced rainfall, wringing out that much moisture. And as this system continues to push northward on the forecast track, it'll slide just off to the north of the Dominican Republic, but takes really kind of an unsettling turn up to the northwest. Now, there's still a lot of questions on what the long-term forecast looks like with Franklin. We are likely to see a trough come off the east coast of the United States. That could help as a barrier to kind of keep this storm away from coastland, but we will watch it closely. Strengthening is expected in those warmer waters of the Atlantic as we go towards the weekend. And on the West Coast, cleanup efforts are underway following Hillary's destruction in California. Cathedral City experienced the worst of Hillary's wrath. First responders used a bulldozer to clear debris. 46 people needed to be rescued. after being trapped behind mudslides. Fox Weather's Nicole Valdez is in Cathedral City. Nicole, how are things looking this morning?
Jane, truly an extraordinary sight here in this Palm Desert area. It's hard to take your eyes off of the amount of mud that sits behind me. And I'm going to walk through here as thankfully dozers have cleared a small portion of the road because it gives you a better understanding of how many inches of mud we're talking about. So really regular asphalt level, you're looking at all that mud and it continues kind of going up, reaching all the way to the middle of the driveway of so many homes, really just on this street alone. Not to mention the many others who had to be rescued from their homes, nearly 50 people being trapped by this mud. I mean, an all-out mudslide, according to how people feel about this situation. And let me show you what those dozers were busy doing yesterday and why we're just now seeing the beginning of the cleanup of this mud. And that is because they were trying to get those people who needed to be rescued, stranded in their homes, onto the front loader. So the forklifts that were going here, you see maybe 3 people at a time sitting there having to just be, driven out that way. Those bulldozers really the only sort of vehicles that are able to trek through the density of the mud that still sits here. Now, it's been about 2 days or so, maybe a little bit more like a day and a half, where we've seen, some heat and no rain. So there is some concern that all this mud could start to harden and it be that much more difficult to get through it, to clean it up, and to get these people access out of their homes to those neighborhoods. I just met a woman not too long ago who was rescued yesterday. Tried to walk through it to get back to her home to get some necessary things. She wasn't able to make that journey. So, it's a situation that I think a lot of people are still trying to wrap their heads around, truly in awe of the level of destruction. And I'll point out some things as we come back live here, and you'll see, of course, it's not just the navigational ability for the roads like this, but you take a look at the cars here, and I mean, this little Honda Civic in front of me gives you just a dire picture. I mean, there's no way with how high that mud is, nearly covering that entire tire, that they're going to be able to drive out of here. And you notice that cars in the same situation, one after the other, that trash can nearly halfway filled. I mean, it's almost like a dried up lake in a way, what you're looking at here, but this is a residential community. So Jane, this is a tough situation. There are people here trying to make the best of it. They've got some supplies at home. They're out here sweeping their driveways and trying to trek through the mud barefoot if they need to, but it's not a great situation. They know it's going to take several days to clean this up. The emergency manager here, the mayor, both agreed. So it's about people just trying to get through the next few days as best they can.
One step at a time, that's for sure. Nicole, I mean, it's incredible. Nearly 70% of the year's worth of rain falls in just one day there in Palm Springs. Well, we'll check back in with you as that cleanup continues. Nicole Valdez, live in Palm Springs. Well, Tropical Storm Harold has made landfall in South Texas. Lots to track here on your Fox Weather Hurricane HQ. We've got the latest on the storm as far as the heavy rain and flood risk as it continues through the day. You can follow it right here with us. We'll be right back.
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From hurricane season to storm recovery, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people.
That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
We're back here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ. Tropical Storm Harold pounding South Texas with heavy rain and wind. Corpus Christi in the thick of it with flood warnings. A new tornado warning has just been posted for Duval County, Texas. That runs until 11:45. Want to get you caught up on the very latest. Not only is flooding rain a big concern, but also, too, the threat for tornadoes. The second one there on the board. That's what we're going to continue to monitor closely for Duval County, Oak County, and now McMullen counties under a tornado warning. If you hear that alarm go off, you want to get to a safe place as quickly as possible. Putting as many walls between you and the outdoors. Make sure you get to a safe place on the lowest level of your home. Take these warnings seriously. The spin of Harold as it comes ashore, 50-mile-per-hour winds. Here's the latest. So we have two areas to watch as far as where that rotation sits inside this rain band that's spinning around the center of Harold. Flood warnings for Corpus Christi that will continue into the early part of the afternoon. Let's get to the warnings. Tornado warning here. This runs to 11:45 for Duval County, Texas. Benavides is where we're seeing that rotation right now, just off to the north of that. It's kind of hard to make out the rotation, especially inside these tropical rain bands. Sometimes can be quick and rather weak, but something to monitor closely. It looks a bit broad. This is what we're watching right here. You can see it kind of come together near Mule, just south of Highway 359. Rides right along just north of Benavides. That's going to continue until, again, 11:45. But with the rotation here, we're watching this storm as it comes together. You have the winds that are moving away and towards the radar site. What we're watching for closely, if there is a tornado, it's likely to be in this zone right about there, and that's going to continue to push off to really the southwest as we go over the next couple of hours. Just to the north of that, up towards George West, just to the south. This rotation looks a bit healthier, tight and small, so it's not expecting to be quite big, but this does look like a better representation of where we could see that tornado come together. That just near Mixca, that's going to continue down to the south and southwest over the next, say, 25 to 30 minutes or so. But this rotation coming together, there's a lot of heavy rain that's embedded within these warnings. And so with the potential for a tornado, which has also just been issued, now we've got 3 tornado warnings on the board, this one up towards Beeville. Want to make sure that you're really tuned in on the forecast. Flash warning also too has been extended as the worst of the tight convection around the center of Harold comes ashore. Now we're seeing it really begin to unravel. The worst of the conditions through the middle part of the day today. So this tornado warning for Bee County, Texas runs till 11:45. 3 tornado warnings on the board, 2 flash flood warnings. It's a really active day as the worst of Harold really shows itself across South Texas at this hour. The rotation up here, up to the north, again, not as tight and apparent, but certainly this is what we're watching closely. If there is going to be that quick spin inside these storms, this is where it should be. It's going to continue to push off to really about the south-southwest as we go through the next couple of hours. The way these rain bands are moving, you kind of have this overall spin like this. And as these rain bands continue to push off, it's going to bring the worst of the conditions off to the west. But we have Fox Weather's Jason Fraser, who is live on Padre Island. Now, Padre Island, Jason, is kind of still seeing the rain come through, but it's now the worst of the hazards pushing inland as we have 3 tornado warnings on the board. Not a big surprise sometimes with these tropical systems to get that quick spin, but it's been the heavy rain that's proved a difficult one for a lot of people.
Yeah, when you get that forward motion and it's interacting with the land, that's when you start to get some of those quick spin-up tornadoes. Meanwhile, behind the center of the circulation, we continue to not only get pelted with rain, but also lots of wind here. I mean, I would estimate that these winds are continuing to gust up here on Padre Island anywhere between 40 to about 45 miles per hour. It has certainly reduced visibility here as well. Behind me here, you would be able to see the beach here. I mean, the beach is maybe about 200 feet or so, but unfortunately, because the wind as well as the rain has been really pummeling this area here, we can't even see the water here. So this is why so many emergency officials have been encouraging people to stay off the roads. We heard of a number of school districts that canceled school for the day. Other districts had elected to be on a 2-hour delay. The city of Corpus Christi, they had opted to tell all of their folks to come in on a 2-hour delay here as well here. But visibility is going to continue to be an issue here for at least the next hour to about 2 hours here as the winds have really been kicking up. Unfortunately, a lot of this rain, and it's been producing some hazards here. Jane, I mean, we have likely received anywhere between about 1 inch to about 2 inches of rain here on Padre Island, as well as over in the Corpus Christi area. And we'll likely for about the next hour or two continue to see this rain as well as this wind kicking up.
As far as, South Texas goes, they're really no stranger to tropical systems. They can handle a lot of this. What's been the pulse of the public, especially there on Padre Island? Have you noticed that a lot of people are hunkering down as the storm comes through?
Yeah, I think they have really taken the advice from city leaders to stay inside. Typically during these events, we'll at least see 1 or 2 people venture out either on the beach or we'll maybe even end up seeing a surfer or 2 outside. We have not seen either of that happening here, and we've been here for at least the past 7 hours. So that is definitely, of course, a good thing here. And because Harold is going to be a fast-moving system here, by the end of today, we'll likely end up seeing not rain showers, but actually the sun. Woo. As you can see here, Jane, exactly what I was talking about with, these winds. Yeah. They have really been kicking up here. Woo.
My goodness, that was a tough spread of wind there and rain. I'll let you get inside. Definitely great reporting out there, Jason. We'll check back in with you, but I really want to get to more of what's happening. The alert system is lighting up here with those 3 tornado warnings. I want to show you what's happening. So those outer rain bands going to continue to shift on shore. Now that it's pushed inland, we're seeing the maybe strongest convection around that center of circulation begin to push into portions of the more, say, central portions of South Texas. But here's the alert board. Lots to keep track of. You too can keep track of the storm. Download the free Fox Weather app. You can watch everything unfold here, not only in the live coverage, but also too with the radar tab. You can follow the storms along with me as we take a look at what's happening. But, I mean, we do have a couple people out there on the roads. It's almost hard sometimes to get everybody to stay off and stay indoors. Tropical storm warnings posted. Now, in a lot of ways, this storm is quite welcome for South Texas. We've been riddled with drought and heat, and rain is definitely a good thing, but too much of it leads to these problems. We have 2 active flash flood warnings, one of which continues until 2:15 local time. That one a little bit pushed a little further inland into Fremont and Alice. But we also have 3 tornado warnings to keep track of. Now, in these warnings, we have these outer rain bands that kind of sneak their way in around that center of Harold. And we can sometimes in tropical systems get a little bit of quick, brief rotation. This one here for Benavides, this is going to continue until 11:45, rotation coming together. You can see how it kind of pushes onshore, tightened up just a little bit, say just off to the south of the town, and it is going to continue to slide off to the southwest as we go into time. So we'll watch it closely as we go throughout the hour. Up to the north of there, we have another tornado warning, this for Oak County, Texas. Now the rotation broadening out just a touch. It was maybe showed itself a little bit better just off to the west of 37. Here's Highway 37, and you've got that rotation that came just south of George West. It's broadened out a bit. So what typically happens, especially with these tropical systems, you'll get that brief tightening as those outer rain bands kind of swirl their way on through. With that tightening can spawn a tornado, but with those warnings in play, you want to still take them quite seriously, even if it doesn't come to fruition. Now, in Beeville, we do have, again, some weaker rotation. So the overall big picture is, here comes the worst of the storm, right? You've got heavy rain, you've got this twist. Those winds are now gusting upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour. We've had a number of reports in the Corpus Christi area at the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station of wind gusts up to 60 to 63 miles per hour. Here's a look right now at some of the rain rates that we've had inside some of these storms. This an added danger too, especially for those of us under a tornado warning. New one on the board just coming in for Jim Wells County, Texas, Live Oak County, Texas as well. This runs until 12 o'clock. So if you take a look at the structure of Harold, you know, you've got these outer rain bands that are going to continue to slide their way through. You get that natural twist with a storm that's spinning, and it's not that hard to pick up the rotation inside these storms to bring in a tornado. Sinton, West Sinton, a bit more of a more populated area just outside our Corpus Christi suburbs, where we do see this tornado threat for San Patricio County until 12 o'clock. Halt what you're doing. Hoping most of us were inside as the worst of the storm is coming through. You want to get to the lowest level of your home, putting as many walls between you and the outdoors as possible. If this tornado is expected to happen, as we have that warning in play, it is going to bring in the concern that you won't be able to see the danger with that heavy rain coming through. But here's the rotation now. Again, quite odd, so we don't see any confirmation on radar that this tornado is happening, but with the indication of those brighter colors of green, we do know that those strong winds are present, and that rotation inside the storm is possible and tightening as we go through time. So we'll watch that one closely. Looks to approach just along Interstate 37 as it snakes just off to the west of Corpus Christi. But we'll stop it here, Matthew, real quick. Matthew, my weather producer, behind scenes helping me out. So we've got these outer rain bands, 2 of which are kind of pushing their way onshore. Center of Harold is somewhere in here, and you can see the twist. And even Harold kind of broadening things out, you get these outer rain bands that push their way through, and that's what's going to bring in not only natural twist to bring in the tornado threats, but all that heavy rain has now pushed into these communities just south of Corpus Christi into Kingsville. That leading edge of rain that you can see right there as it makes its way through is what's prompted these flood warnings. So too much of a good thing leads to these problems, especially when we've had severe drought across portions of southern Texas. And so the ground really can't handle a lot of this rain as it comes through. Even as quickly as the rain is pushing on shore, it is quickly overwhelming a lot of streets and a lot of drains, and this is likely the type of flooding that we're picking up. in these warnings. Street flooding, highway flooding that has made it difficult to get around town. Here's a look at our rain totals over the last 6 hours. We have been able to squeeze out 2 to 3 inches of rain. This Corpus Christi southward down into Kingsville. A couple pockets maybe where we could get up to 4 inches in a few spots, but these flash flood warnings are going to continue to expand at least through the middle part of the afternoon as long as this rain continues to fall. There is a silver lining in the forecast. If we take a look at the Fox model, you'll see that it is moving pretty quickly. And so we should expect to see brighter conditions as we go towards the end of the day today. Here's about 2, 3, 4 o'clock. Worst of the rain kind of pushing over the Mexico border, and you get a break. A couple more rain bands could kind of bring their way on shore as Harold kind of unravels, but it is going to become less of an issue for South Texas as this heavy rain begins to subside. We'll likely see some of those warnings begin to drop. But in the meantime, the Fox Weather Alert System is busy. We have active tornado warnings. You can track them along with us on your Fox Weather app. Keep you abreast of these warnings. Stay with us here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ. Here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ. We have a lot to get to as we go through your Tuesday. We have team coverage in the field in South Texas. First, getting to Harold, which has made landfall on Padre Island. Here's a look at the radar, active as these rain bands continue to shift their way through. Flooding a big concern, but two, the risk for tornadoes. We have 5 tornado warnings on the Fox Weather Alert System. This one for Goliad, Texas, it's just to the south of the town of where we could see this rotation come together. Now, it's not atypical to see these brief, quick spin-ups inside these tropical rain bands. They're going to continue to shift their way through South Texas over the next couple of hours. Here's that new rotation coming together. You can see it's quite broad, tightened up just a touch, running south along the town, along really Highway 183. That sits right about here. So just off to the east of the highways where we have that rotation coming together. That warning is going to continue until 12 o'clock. But taking a look at the big picture, we certainly have a lot to get to. Here's the rotation as Harold comes ashore, and now we've got those rain bands kind of really bringing in the worst of the weather as we've gone through the middle part of the day. Want to get you caught up on the storm and where it's going. Now, Tropical Storm Harold is the first Atlantic system of the season to make landfall on the U.S. coastline of the Gulf Coast. Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker, Mark Sudduth, is in Corpus Christi Bay. Mark, great to have you on. Walk us through what you're seeing here, as it's really been a tough stretch of weather this morning.
Well, just as you have come to me, another one of those bands has come across the bay I'm in a pretty big truck here, and it is rocking pretty good. It's like you're in a car wash, but people are on the outside of it, moving it back and forth. Pretty dramatic increase in the wind. Had a report from a weather flow station not far from here at Texas A&M of 60 miles per hour. Those are very dependable stations. I believe it because it is cranking out here right now.
Yeah, and you know, Harold, you're in Hillary. You were in Harold now. You were in Hillary. You know, you've had a pretty unique advantage of seeing both of these storms. Yeah. What do you talk about the differences between, you know, the Pacific storm to Harold now coming in out of the Gulf?
Well, you know, in Southern California, they are not unprecedented tropical cyclones coming up there. But what Hillary did was quite a different situation. A lot of heavy rain, full-on tropical storm conditions. I experienced that just a couple of days. It's been a whirlwind 2 days for me. And then to come over to the Texas coast where they are used to it, even though they are used to it, it can still be a nuisance. Schools are out. People are disrupted a little bit. And at least it is bringing that rainfall. You know, these things have their pluses and minuses as long as they don't get too intense.
You know, South Texas, no stranger to tropical systems. And in a lot of ways, this rain was quite welcome. You know, they've been really devastated with drought and heat all summer long. And so to see those temperatures come down, get some rain on the board is in a lot of ways a really good thing for South Texas. But those waves right now in Corpus Christi are quite intense. You know, talk about the surf hazards. Hopefully people are heeding the warnings. Nobody's out there as those waves come crashing in.
Yeah, nobody's been down here. They were this morning. They were anywhere from walking their dogs on that seawall to a couple of people on one of those recumbent bicycles or tricycles or whatever it was. Not anything like that now. Nobody going in the water. A couple of the shots that Jason Fraser had, or that we had in some of his shots earlier from, I guess it was one of the surf line cameras down there of Padre Island. No, nobody out in this. Pretty smart here in Texas. They know how to deal with these things.
They certainly do, that's for sure. Now, this is the anniversary time of Harvey, where, of course, a much different storm, a much more large and powerful system. But, you know, as far as the storm surge goes, you know, obviously not seeing the impacts of that. But I think the question is going forth, especially as we go into the Atlantic hurricane season, we still have a lot of it to go. You know, preparations need to continue. Texas knows what they're doing. What do you think? Do you think Corpus Christi has done a good job of really preparing themselves for Harold as it's come through?
Oh, yeah. I think the experience from the past helps. These folks here have the benefit of the local National Weather Service. There are a lot of hurricane workshops in the off season, and it's, you know, something, again, that happens enough that people are generally ready. They know what's coming. But, you know, when you get something like a Harvey 6 years ago that made landfall up near Rockport and Fulton, that was a Category 4, a very dangerous, different beast than what we're talking about here. So you take the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly down here.
Absolutely. You know, Mark, we've really got, you know, a couple of hours left of the worst of the impacts here from Harold in South Texas. Right. What are you most concerned with before I let you go?
The heavy rain moving inland, and then those tornadoes. I mean, all those polygons that were showing up that you were showing earlier there, a lot of different warnings coming in. Those are going to happen very quickly as all that spreads inland. The frictional effects there, bringing that twisting motion, the tornado threat, and the heavy rain threat, I think will be the biggest impacts going forward.
Yeah, that we're watching right now. Well, Mark Sadeth, always good to have you on. Your expertise certainly greatly appreciated as rain is coming for South Texas. We'll check back in with you.
Thank you.
Well, we have Fox Weather Team coverage in South Texas. We'll get out to Jason Fraser in just a minute. But first, I want to get you caught up on some of the latest of where the storm is and where it's going. So here's a look at these waves as they come ashore. There is some impact of maybe a little bit of coastal flooding in some of these areas. No surprise. Look at these waves as they come on in. Storm surge was only expected to be about 1 to 3 feet, which generally speaking is easily attainable, and also we can handle that. Now, Harold making landfall earlier this morning, now pushing ashore, and you can see as it tightens up, it's running into that frictional impact of land, kind of slowing it down, helping it unravel and weaken. But in the meantime, it's bringing in tropical storm force wind gusts, and also to this threat for brief spin up tornadoes. We do have tropical storm warnings that are expected to continue at least through the end of the day today. We are expecting improvement in the forecast by the time, say, the dinner hour comes around. But in the meantime, we've still got a long ways to go as far as this rain and as it falls. But Corpus Christi, you know, this leading edge of rain that's now moving through Alice, that's what came through and initially prompted your flash flood warnings. Now it's prompted those warnings back out towards Kingsville and Alice. That's going to continue out towards Laredo as we go towards the end of the day today. Still seeing some of these outer rain bands switch on shore into Corpus Christi, but you see the blinking red boxes. These here are tornado warnings that have spun up because of that frictional pull with land and the storm. There's about 20,000 people inside of this warning here in San Patricio County in Texas. This runs until 12 o'clock. This is a suburb just outside of Corpus Christi, and so we'll watch it closely. We do have Interstate 37 that snakes right here. The rotation, again, is quite broad, and it's pretty typical to see these rain bands, especially closer to the center circulation. Oftentimes, you can get that spin up inside that storm. You can see as it comes together, we're kind of tracking it out for you. Just slide off to the northwest of Sinton. It's going to continue to come together, perhaps approaching the highway. This is what we're concerned with right here. This is all radar indicated. We don't have confirmation that a tornado is in progress, but the difficult piece here is that visibility is reduced greatly with these warnings. So you won't be able to see that tornado as it comes through, as this rain comes down pretty heavily. We do have a warning up into B County, Texas, this until 11:45. This tornado warning, again, radar indicated. Want to take it just as seriously, though. You want to get to a safe place, putting as many walls between you and the outdoors as possible. Tracking out the rotation, the history, it's broadening out just a touch. So when we say broadening out, it means that those winds are not quite as tight and profound to bring in that tornado threat. But it was once warned near Beeville, and now it's beginning to perhaps weaken a touch as it moves towards La Parra and Cadiz. But if you're in these towns, you want to make sure that you are staying in your safe place until the warning is dropped. Up towards Goliad, Texas, again, heavy rain coming down inside these outer rain bands. You do have this threat for Milo and Riverdale, where we could see the potential for a tornado come through. Looking for the rotation, it was tight